All right, welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. We had a question that came up in the Q&A portion of our podcast. We did maybe a week or two ago, and this question comes up quite frequently. But when it came up, it was like, there's no way we're handling this in a Q&A in like a 10 or 15 minute format, which is generally about how long we'll spend like per question. This one I think deserves a little bit more, let's just say, attention. And part of it is, what's that?
TLC.
Yeah, for sure, TLC, because I think what happens is it just kind of gets sprinkled into the mix and people think, oh, yeah, I know I need to be doing a better job of this. And, if I did, I would probably perform better, or, things in life would probably be better, and I'm working on it. It's sort of like almost like the diet or nutrition side of things, because it is such a regular part of your day. It's not like exercise, which might be a regular part of your day, but it's very regimented. There's like reps and sets to it. And, there's variety through the week in terms of the, how you're applying it versus what we're talking about, which is sleep, is not really thought of that way, I think, by a lot of people. And so the question specifically was, how does sleep impact my athletic performance? And I think more specifically, the questions come up like, if I'm not sleeping well, how does that impact my athletic performance? And maybe we just take like athletic out of there, because I think being an athlete, I think if we're just trying to perform in the game of life or in the court or the gym or on the mat or whatever else, like we should just be looking at performance. And, being an athlete is just a form of performance. Mm-hmm. So, but because sleep goes way beyond you performing as an athlete. But I do want to respect the question and talk more specifically about that, because I think a lot of people listen to the show. It's very relatable to them. But if you don't consider yourself an athlete in the game of life or otherwise, all this stuff's going to be very relevant to you.
All still applies, definitely.
Yeah. So going back to your statement, like there about it deserving some TLC, it's gotten it. I mean, it's not a secret. Sleep is important. And people understand this. I've always said, like, just talk to somebody who hasn't slept well for a few days and tell me what kind of human you're dealing with, or what kind of human you become. I can very much tell you, what kind of human I become.
That's a form of torture, like in or in some
sleep
parts
deprivation.
Of the world. Yeah, sleep deprivation.
It'll kill you eventually.
Yeah, it literally. So, I think again, like it's generally well understood. Yep, I need to sleep. I need to make sure I get my rest. Then it digs a little deeper. Yeah, I know. Well, there's this REM sleep, and I need to get into a deeper sleep, and I do track my sleep, and am I getting good quality sleep? So people have an understanding, I think, a better understanding of like quality of sleep is very important. Mm. Then it comes down to how can I maximize my sleep? Tell me, okay, so if I need better quality sleep, I need to be sleeping a little bit longer. What are supplements I can be taking, to help me do that? What's the thing I can be taking orally to put in my body to help me go to sleep? And then if they've tried that and that's not working, then they go, okay, maybe there's something to these nighttime rituals or behavior modification, much again, like diet or exercise. Give me the pill, give me the powder. Then they might
quick answer.
Yeah.
The solution.
Yeah. Like what's going to fix my problem? It's in a can.
Yeah.
Right. Precisely. Or it's in a bottle. And then so finally they may be forced to go to like some behavior modifications or really start to examine what it is they are or aren't doing. And when that starts to come up, then they start to realize, well, this goes a lot further than the things that I'm exposing myself to from like a diet and exercise perspective. This goes a lot deeper than that. And so I think this brings in the question, like, what can I be doing to get that edge? And when people are looking for an edge, like going to like supplements, for example, for like power or strength or whatever else, we've always said this, like you're talking about like a very, very small, minuscule percentage of the whole. What's the term that you use? Looking for
majoring in the minors or?
Yeah,
looking for the answers in the margins.
Yeah, looking for answers in the margins or majoring in the minors. Yeah. I would say this about sleep in context to that. If you major in anything, you should be majoring in sleep as a human. Specifically, if you're an athlete, you need to spend some time here and understand this a little bit more. So that's what I wanted to unpack today, specific to the athlete. And man, it's such a huge topic. We've heard so many people talking about it.
Yeah, I know you all did a podcast on this. Maybe it was last year. I think it was you and Stephen and Jeff.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Yes, on sleep hygiene. But, the other thing is, too, I think over the last several years, the paradigm around sleep and stress management has really shifted because, for a while it was like, oh, I'm going to work. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And now it's like, oh, sleep is really important because if you don't have sleep, then how are you going to perform?
Yeah.
So
hustle culture.
And then the decline. And then the health fallouts from not having enough sleep too.
Which we're going to get into.
Oh, I was just saying that, that whole grind till I die, hustle culture, work 20 hours, sleep 4 hours, sleep when I die. Yeah, that whole thing I think is being shifted a little bit, that it's like, well, yeah, if you'll sleep when you die, well, you're going to get there faster if you're not sleeping.
Yeah, talk about that. Like, what do we know about sleep and longevity, morbidity, and mortality? What can you tell us?
Essentially, if you're not getting enough sleep, your risk of all-cause mortality is going to increase. Just your risk of dying increases if you are not sleeping adequately. It's for a myriad of different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, and the simple, I guess, response there is it's you're more likely to find the grave much sooner if you're not sleeping well.
Yeah,
and I don't think that's a good outcome for the majority of people. Like,
is your grind worth it? Yeah,
right. And I by the way, I am 1,000% guilty of that sleep when you're dead thing. Like, I did that for a lot of fucking years, and I paid the price for it. And in a way, I'm sort of glad that I did, because it put me in a position to have this like higher level of awareness of my own issues, and then really respect where some of those were coming from. And it wasn't going to be found in a pill, in a powder, in a medication, in a bottle somewhere. And I mean that like in the pharmaceutical sense, and or maybe in the alcohol sense, at the bottom of that bottle either. It really put things into perspective for me when I really started to understand that's just no way to live. However, I will respect that as a professional. Maybe you're an athlete, maybe you have some type of a role in a job. I think first responders, shift workers,
military.
The military. This is something that can be very, very challenging, that you have very little, if zero, control over at times. And that is a very real thing. So understanding maybe how these things impact you to maybe, preload the events that you may be going into or the shifts that you might be going into, and understanding those may be helpful for you. And then, specifically coming out of the back end, because while you're in it, I understand there's not a lot you can do. It's very hard. I made a lot of choices, and maybe at those times thought I didn't have a choice, or this was just the way it was going to have to be. But looking back, in terms of managing sleep management, stress management, it goes hand in hand. I had choices, and I just chose to do other things.
We tell ourselves it doesn't need to be the priority, that work, especially I think this country, hustle culture, all of that, we deprioritize it because we have to prioritize striving and achieving and ambition. And you're lazy if you sleep too much, or, all kinds of myths.
I think there's a lot of things that drive beyond the hustle culture, people's lack of sleep these days versus maybe before. I mean, I think technology has a lot to do with this, and we should be blaming it to some extent on people's poor sleep hygiene, or blaming people's poor sleep hygiene on the availability, accessibility of that stuff. And maybe, at least for a lot of people, just not understanding how that will impact it. And without going down the rabbit hole or into the weeds on like blue light and things like that, here's what we know. We know that you getting in front of your device at the, in and around bedtime stimulates more than just your emotional state, right? It literally stimulates physiological responses and excites the brain. There's all kinds of things that are happening in the frontal cortex as well as the midbrain that are firing up, and that could absolutely be part of why you're not sleeping as long or as deep and with as much quality as possible. But beyond that, I mean, like, even if you don't want to talk about that, I just having this conversation. The last couple of people I talked to, one was just last night, and that nobody's ever gotten off. This is a quote from my friend Aaron over at Silent. Nobody's ever gotten off Instagram after spending an hour there and going, God, I feel so great right now. I feel so much better. Or off watching the news.
That really filled my cup.
Oh yeah, I am just a better person for spending my time and energy there. I don't think there's a person on the planet that can truthfully and honestly look themselves in the mirror or anybody else in the eye and say that. So, there are emotional responses. You get the brain going on different thought process, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. So when you look at people's lack of sleep or quality of sleep, I think this has a lot to do with it. Along with that comes the demands that having that technology, that connectivity through technology can place on a person, the communication level, like that people feel like they can be reached at any time, right? And that you owe them a response right now at any time. And whether you are or aren't responding to that DM or that text message or that email, it's there. Yeah, you're thinking about it. So I think technology in that sense drives a lot of these poor sleep habits. And that trickles on down into work, right? And what you're expected to be able to handle in terms of maybe scope of work, your job responsibilities, the communication levels that happen there, and all the stuff you're inundated with and bombarded with all day. You're taking that home, and then it's there on your device. And then again, this can very much impact or interrupt what you should be doing to take care of yourself, your mind, your brain, your immune system, and things that we're going to talk about here. So
becomes omnipresent.
1,000%. So I think most people can wrap their head around that too and understand, yep, I'm definitely guilty of that. I lay in bed at night and I
check
emails. I do. I do quite frequently. It's a bad habit. It's also like I want to say, when I say habit, it's a bad behavior. It's not something you should be doing if you're concerned about your sleep. So
be hard to break though. I find myself, I sit down in the last hour, I'm like, okay, it's time to read, but I keep my phone too close to me. And then I'm reading and then all of a sudden I'm on my phone. And I end up literally like throwing it across the room, like get out of my, like it's like stuck to you, like get away from me. It's just a habit.
Yeah, it's an easy one, and I think we're all guilty of it. And I watch the kids, they're guilty of it too. And
locked in.
Yeah, they have to be
chin down, locked in.
I mean, that's where all the schoolwork happens.
And it becomes stupid.
They can very quickly. So I think those are some things that people should be aware of as we're going into that. I'm not going to make this about a tech talk. About how these things impact the physiology. But let's talk about that athlete and their performance and some specifics with regard to how sleep interplays or could impact lack thereof, or which I think leads straight into the flip side of that reciprocal of getting enough sleep can impact your performance. This one, I think we can kind of break down into kind of three major categories. So to keep people with us so we don't get too lost. Because we could talk about this for a long time.
A lot of directions.
We'll try to keep this one, from this point forward, very focused. There are so many studies on sleep now, and they continue to come out. And there's a lot of studies, on with athletes and sleep. So they're becoming more prevalent. These are good studies. There's a lot of meta-analysis that's out there that you can read. There's a lot of opinion papers. There's a lot of technology, I think, that's been developed or at least been worked on. So you can get a lot of information on this stuff, and I think you can get overwhelmed with that information. But if we had to break this down kind of into three major categories, the things you might be concerned with as an athlete are, number one, the cognitive impacts of not getting enough sleep. That's a huge one. So we're going to break that down. The next one is going to be basically your recovery system, which is so important with regard to whatever your performance goals happen to be, whether that's, again, performing at work, performing in life, performing on the field, mat, whatever else. So there's performance issues there. Obviously, we can get in some really deep physiology, and we'll try to keep it high level here, both because I don't want to try and get outside of our lane or scope, but also because it's just a rabbit hole. And then the last thing is the immune function and what happens to basically lacking sleep or lacking quality sleep is immunosuppressive. And so as an athlete, obviously that's an issue. And also taking into account that as an athlete, we know that intense exercise and intense exercise programs is a bit immunosuppressive, which can have its pros and its cons, but obviously you can't perform if you're sick. So let's back it up. Let's go to like the cognitive impacts of not getting enough sleep. Like what's going on in the brain during the time we're sleeping.
We could probably start with our sleep cycles. I guess a quick little rundown of that it essentially boils down to our light sleep, or you could call it shallow sleep. And there's a couple different levels of that. There's our very lightest sleep, and then there's a little bit deeper sleep. And then we have the restorative sleep, which is REM sleep, and our deep sleep or non-REM deep sleep. And those, the REM and the non-REM deep sleep are going to be where not only our body recovers and repairs, but especially our mind recovers and repairs, consolidates memories, emotional functions. I think we've all experienced waking up and for whatever reason, you're like, man, I can't think very clearly today, or I'm irritable today, or I don't feel motivated. I feel foggy. I can't focus. But I slept, for whatever, 7 hours, 8 hours. You may have slept for that long, but were you effectively getting into your sleep cycles and efficiently getting into your deep sleep cycles? So I think that can sometimes get lost. We think about just time in bed equals the amount of sleep that I got, when that's not the case.
Yeah, when you start to look at some of the studies that are out there, what you see is as they do these studies, while athletes will report, well, I get 9 to 10 hours a night or whatever. So let's say I'm reporting 10 hours a night of sleep. I'm really working hard to get through my day, get all my stuff done, and make sure I'm in bed. But there's a latency period from the time they actually go to bed to the time they actually fall to sleep. And then, as you just referenced, there are these stages that your body and brain need to go through in order to reach a period where you are truly in a state of recovery, repair. It's not that you're not getting rested, but like at what level are you being quote unquote rested or recovered? And so that's to that point, like you may be laying in bed for 9 to 10 hours, but how much of that 9 to 10 hours is being as impactful as you need or want it to be.
And those sleep cycles, you go through those sleep cycles multiple times through the night. So it's not like you just go through those,
stage 1, stage 2,
right.
stage 3. Yeah, they cycle through multiple times. So how many times you're cycling through. There's also when you're waking up, what cycle you're in when you're waking up. I think we've also all probably experienced where you wake up and you're almost ready to go immediately. Like you hit the ground running. And then other times when you wake up and you're like confused and don't know where you are and you're like, what the fuck? And, because you probably were in the middle of a deep sleep cycle or a REM cycle. And all of a sudden you're awake and you're like, what, Earth, where am I?
I think a lot of people can relate to that. You're awoken suddenly.
Yes.
Like startled or whatever. That being, I don't know, the dog's barking at something going outside, or there's a car alarm goes off, or
you have to get up and go to the bathroom.
Something, yeah, but something that just like jolts you out of your sleep. Everybody knows that like confusion, that state of confusion, that's your brain having to kind of reboot there from where it was, and that kind of that shutdown phase where it restores and kind of uploads and downloads all the things from the day. That's a really good way of looking at it.
So if you wake up, and it's time to get up and get into your day, and you wake up in confusion mode, obviously that's going to affect your performance in whatever you're doing. And when it comes to your athletic performance, your reaction time, say you're, a quarterback, and there is decision-making processes. You're going through a series of reads, and you need to think very quickly and be decisive.
Yep.
If you are not properly rested, you hesitate. You're not quite sure what decision to make. And that applies to bunch of sports.
Yeah, but that's a really good point when we're talking about this. So in some of the studies that are out there, what some of these things have concluded is like the power output isn't necessarily impacted with lack of sleep right away, not in the first few days. Like if you had a couple of days of really poor sleep quality, that stuff kind of remains. What is really impacted and markedly impacted is reaction times, like start times, reaction times to, let's say, like hitting sports racket or club sports, those kind of things. The reaction times are dramatically slowed down. Reaction times to a starting gun if you're in track. So like club sports and track and swimming were studied quite a bit here because there's this immediate, like, quick response. Again, these are cognitive things, what your brain is picking up and how it's responding to it. And that those sprint workouts weren't beyond that, they weren't so much impacted from a performance level, right? Even like your heavy weightlifting. The more endurance type sports, however, were. So the longer duration exercise or the longer duration stuff based on your lack of, or if you had a very low or poor quality sleep, those things were impacted a little bit more, which is interesting. So we're talking about the cognitive stuff here, and then we're going to move into more of like the energy systems and fuel system stuff here. But that reactive time is a certain thing. I think, when we start talking about cognitive things, we have to talk about mood and what happens when you're feeling tired or feeling fatigued. And there's a difference between, I would say, like physical fatigue and mental or psychological, emotional fatigue. Those are all probably be categorized in their own ways. Yeah, in their own ways too. But I know as an athlete, if I feel tired, I have a shitty workout. I think so. There's the mood piece, and what does that mood drive in terms of behavior, thought process?
100%.
I mean, I don't know for you guys. I mean, how does that impact you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling tired or you're feeling kind of fuzzy, not feeling sharp, you may not be as confident. You're not going to walk on to the court, the field, whatever, with as much
prowess,
swag. Yeah, you're not going to come in with that edge because you just feel kind of off. You don't feel like you're thinking quickly. You don't feel like you're, maybe one step ahead of your opponent if you're in some, a combat sport or, some type of one-on-one competition. There's an element of anticipation that goes on there. And, that kind of psychological confidence, like, look good, feel good, play good. This is just feel good, play good.
Yeah, they're measuring this subjectively in some of these studies. Like they're asking athletes through surveys, like, how are you feeling? And they'll say that. So there also could be a feeling of anxiety. I mean, I know I feel that when
extra
I'm
nervousness.
And that's not good. When we're talking about when we move kind of to the next thing in energy systems, hormonal responses and things like that. Like if you want to be on your A game, having additional anxiety, or and moving on, like being cranky. Like what is that feeling that I'm feeling like? Kind of brain foggy, just cranky. I don't want to be bothered because you don't have the psychological or emotional mental bandwidth to handle all the things that may be happening around you. That is not an optimal position to be in as an athlete if you're looking to perform.
Yeah. You're a leader on the team, and maybe the team looks to you somewhat to motivate them, get them going, and you're being an asshole, you're in a bad mood, or you're not your usual, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. That could trickle down to your entire team, your entire squad.
Yeah, which could have detrimental or deleterious effects regard decision-making, which is the thing I think people don't really account for in this. So we've just kind of trickled this down to, if you're on a team and, winning and losing is important, and you're a captain, a coach, or a player coach, or something like that, you obviously, poor decision-making or not being in the moment at the time, being, not making, let's just say, the best decision or being in the best position to make the best decision.
Calling the right play, whatever it is. Yeah.
You are putting everybody else at risk. You're the win or loss. Obviously, that could be confounded by a lot of other things if you're on a team that, let's say, is responsible for fighting fires, saving lives, chasing criminals, going into hairy situations if you're in the military or things like that. So, I mention those things because there's a lot of people listen to the show that are in those job roles or work in those fields. But I'll take it another step further. If you're responsible for teaching children, looking after children,
or physicians and nurses.
Physicians, nurses. Yeah, like if you're operating, heavy equipment and vehicles, let's be honest, like when accidents occur, like when we look at like the propensity of the accidents for an accident to happen, oftentimes these are human errors, and there is a lapse in judgment or just a poor decision, split-second decision that's made. Yep. That's the definition of an accident. How many of these things could be avoided? So as it relates to the athlete, and kind of taking you into the gym, onto the court, or whatever else, if we're not in the, cognitively, if we're not recovered, and sleep, there is no way to buy that back. There's no supplement, there's no pill, there's no device, there's no nothing that is going to get back what you don't get. So people are like, oh, I got to catch up on my sleep. No, you're not really doing that. You're not really doing that. You're in recovery debt from a a brain perspective, and you're not really going to get that back. It's a matter of trying to manage through the process so your body can return to some kind of a homeostasis. And, the more we can maintain that homeostasis, I think the more predictable things are for both the body, the brain, and you sort of emotionally. And that's going to help you through your processes of training, competing, recovering, and managing all the things in life that get thrown at you along the way while you're trying to do that stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I was looking through a couple statistics here on the topic of how, basically the cognitive downsides of sleep deprivation can manifest. Drowsy driving, responsible for more than 6,000 fatal car crashes every year.
Yep.
Study estimates annual cost of workplace errors and accidents linked to insomnia at $31 billion.
Wow.
So
That's
$31 billion worth of
sleep can be
money lost because people are tired.
Yeah, lack of sleep can be expensive, apparently. I think it's like, so we're looking at these cognitive things. Well, what could I do? We'll talk about a little bit of the hygiene stuff later, but what could I be doing to maybe try to fill in the gaps? You mentioned all these different sleep cycles. We've talked about this before, like taking naps. I think naps take practice, right? And they need to be programmed effectively. So I think if you've got a regular routine and you can sort of, I would say, objectively and subjectively measure how these naps may be impacting you. Just because you quote unquote feel better doesn't necessarily mean you're rested, right, and or recovered. But programming naps in, how long they should be.
Yeah, 2 hours isn't a nap. You just went to sleep.
Yeah, that's what it is. Exactly. So you're getting into this sleep cycle that's probably started. If you, that's not a nap. That's sleeping versus like a 15 or 10, maybe to 20 minute, 30 minute period. Now this is very individual. We also know this, like what kind of benefits you can get out of it. But it does seem there is some evidence to suggest like you can kind of train yourself into getting more. And there's cumulative effects of both sleep deprivation and sort of coming back to life through getting more sleep.
Banking sleep.
Yeah, banking it up. I mean, can you talk to that? I mean, anything you want to say there?
As far as catching up, I mean, napping, I know that took me quite a bit of practice. And that was something that I tried to employ years ago when I had a late night job where I was working until 2, 3, sometimes 4 in the morning. And I still couldn't sleep past 9 a.m. because my body just would not allow me to flip-flop my schedule to sleep until noon. And that was the first time in my life I was able to nap, which, how much effect did it really have? It was hard to say, but I know that it felt helpful at least. And as far as, can you actually catch up on sleep? I think I've heard different things about that. I know, like me personally, I use the Whoop tracker, and that does basically encourage you to catch up on sleep via naps, or if you slept poorly one night, sleep extra tonight, and now your sleep, it tracks sleep debt, day after day, week over week, and that in that program, the more you sleep, the more you can sort of catch up, but that can be hard as well. I know I can't, if I sleep 5 hours one night, I can't sleep 9 hours the next night. I can't do that. My body won't let me.
Yeah, that's the point I was talking about, this cumulative effect. Like, okay, you were short an hour last night. Okay, well, tonight you may be able to quote unquote sort of start to catch that back up by getting a little bit more rest. But if you go 3, 4 nights, right, with an hour to 2 hours less sleep per night,
now you're way in the hole. Yeah.
Now you're a full night's sleep in the hole. If we're talking like 6 to 7 hours of sleep a night, if that's what you're trying to get. And again, a lot of these studies on athletes, not just on humans, but on athletes, not on an intramural athlete in college. These would be competitive athletes. They're looking at more like the 9 to 10 hour range for folks as being most optimal. As you become an adult, you may need a little less sleep in terms of full recovery versus like a toddler or an infant or whatever as we progress through life. But, there seems to be some type of a sweet spot around that 9 to 10 hour range for like your advanced athletes. Again, that's not probably most people listening to the show, but at the same time, like to take that into account, like just do a little math right now. How much sleep are you really getting a night? Keeping in mind what we've sort of already talked about, like, okay, you got in bed at 9:00, but you were, Instagramming and YouTubing and Facebooking and, LinkedIning and all of those things until 10:30. And then, okay, I finally put the phone down. Then
how long after that until you actually were asleep?
Right. And then how many times did, in my case, did, the neighbors come home late night, or are they talking to their relatives in some other part of the world, at midnight on their speakerphone, outside walking up and down the sidewalk, and the dog's losing her shit because she's like, you're not supposed to be out there. It's late. This is my house. Get out of my yard kind of thing. And again, I'm just painting, this is kind of a stretch, but I'm kind of painting the picture of, I turn the phone off at 10:30, but I'm not really falling into a deeper sleep. I'm not allowed to. And when I do, it may be several hours later. So again, this speaks to the quality. So I think there's other things that for people to think about. They're like, no, that's not a problem. I can turn my stuff off, right? I can turn my stuff off, or I can start doing that a few hours before I'm supposed to go to bed, or an hour and a half or whatever before I'm supposed to go to bed. I don't have to worry about the dog barking. I ain't got one of those. I ain't got neighbors. I've already worked through my sleep sanctuary, which we can kind of talk about in terms of sleep hygiene and all those things. I got temperature controlled. I've covered all my lights. Stuff we'll cover. But for athletes, a lot of times they will be, we are. I know when I was competing, like there wasn't a lot going through my head outside. I didn't have a lot of bandwidth for anything other than like work, a little bit of social stuff. Everything was very focused to my competition, whatever it happened to be. If it was like multi-sport, it was like, I got to get up at this time to get my ride in. I got to be at, I know I'm training at these zones. I got to get my meals in. I have to pack my meals. That thought process keeps athletes up at night. Just thinking about kind of what
they're prepared.
Yeah, what they did today.
I remember everything.
Am I ready for tomorrow? And God forbid you should have missed something along the way. Yeah. You recognize in that thought process, oh fuck.
It's red alert.
I didn't take my 5 grams of creatine today. Like all my gains are going to be gone.
I feel myself deflating as we speak.
And while I joke about that, like that is a very real thing for athletes in terms of like what's keeping them up at night, in terms of what they're kind of thinking about. Thoughts of competition, thoughts of not performing well, thoughts of performing really well, how this stuff is impacting their life, and how are they going to balance the studying as a student athlete or the against the workout tomorrow, the other responsibilities. Yeah. These are very real things.
Yeah, those things you can be kept up by excitement. I know that's happened to me before. Yep. This is a big game, a big race, a big whatever the case may be, and I'm just excited and I'm just fired up, and I'm like, fuck, I need to go to sleep though. I need to go to sleep. It's not going to be an exciting day if I don't go to sleep. And then you get in that trying to force yourself to go to sleep, which only makes everything worse.
So been there. So been there. Yeah, you're just anticipating the next day you get the butterflies or whatever. You labeled it excitement. But that is a huge thing too. And just, maybe you had to travel. So the travel impacts that, in terms
time
of
zones,
the time zones, the hotel room. You're just out of your routine. Yep. So those are all things specific that are maybe going on in your brain. Right. And again, the most important thing that needs to be going on in your brain is the recovery of the work that your brain is doing as a human and specific to this question, an athlete. So you cannot disrespect that enough respect that enough in terms of my brain has to recover. If my brain isn't fully recovered, then there are really poor downstream effects that can happen here as it relates to what my brain is signaling my body to do or not do. And so we kind of talked about like reaction times as being one of the decision-making as being one of those things, the cognitive things, the cognitive stuff. So as we start to move out of the cognitive stuff, we move more into like the recovery outside of the brain, like what's going on physiologically, how is your body recovering from an energy systems perspective, a neuromuscular perspective, hormonal perspective, again, trying to reach that level of equilibrium and recover beyond the dose of exercise that you gave it so that you can come back stronger, bigger, faster, whatever your goals are. So there's things that happen when we see lack of quality sleep. There's some marked things. I mean, what are this kind of, maybe we just go down the list.
As far as like physiological recovery, I would say the thing that stands out to me would be the chronically elevated cortisol levels. And I know with, cortisol, the big bad wolf, we obviously need cortisol. It's very important for a number of bodily functions, but chronically elevated cortisol can also lead to some issues. And we're already, if we're training very hard, we're already increasing our cortisol levels. those of us, me included, who are, might take some kind of pre-workout or coffee or other stimulants to help fuel our intense training. That can also elevate cortisol as well. And when the cortisol is chronically elevated, there are a number of issues that occur that then create a vicious cycle. I'm thinking blood glucose is the number one thing.
Right, like insulin sensitivity.
Yeah.
And what your body's doing in creating insulin, how it's utilizing insulin, and what happens downstream from that, which is vital for life and for performance. So I don't have any studies sitting in front of me now, but it's pretty well recognized that lack of quality sleep, and for a while they were saying it's like 6 hours. If you don't get at least 6 hours, and I'm not going to quote this, so we can go back and look at it later and maybe put it in the show notes, that less than 6 hours of quality sleep had an immediate impact the following day on insulin sensitivity, like for humans in general. So you were less insulin sensitive on less than 6 hours of sleep the following day. So, and again, I'm making a very broad statement here, but I don't think, if we go out there and look for these studies, I think we'll find them pretty easily. Regardless, we do know that increase or decrease sleep or quality of sleep decreases insulin sensitivity, whether it's 6 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or whatever. Again, what happened in the 6 hours, like what kind of quality sleep was it, I think is maybe more of the factor. But if you're trying to regulate and manage your energy systems, and we've talked about those here a lot, on the show quite often, and the interplay between those energy systems and what you just mentioned about that hormone cortisol, this is extraordinarily important, and people should understand that.
Well, but then also think about, if your insulin sensitivity goes down, and we've talked about mood, and with a lack of sleep, making poor decisions when it comes to food, thinking that you need, you're turning to a sugar for quick energy, but then how does your body take that sugar and utilize it for performance? And then the whole metabolism of that and how your body adjusts, to regulate that.
Yeah, even just from an appetite perspective, like this can be appetite suppressive. That cortisol can be appetite suppressive for some people. So for some people, it really drives a certain feelings and certain hormones, which then drives behaviors. It's not necessarily the appetite that they're feeling. It's all the bells and whistles that eating a particular food,
right? Yeah.
Hits the feel good muscles and the endorphins, the feel good signals and the and buttons and the endorphins they might get from like just sitting down and eating my favorite, what do they call this? Like comfort food makes me feel better. And obviously as an athlete, there is a time and a place for this, but this happening too often can be obviously not a great thing.
Yeah, I think it increases if you're tired, your energy levels are lower. We tend to seek calories for that quick energy, and then combined with, brain fog or poor decision making, now we're reaching for, the cheeseburger that we don't need, that is also not going to be aiding our performance, putting us on a blood sugar roller coaster all the time. It really just creates a vicious cycle. I think that's it's something that's very cumulative. I think maybe, here and there, getting poor sleep, you can bounce back from that. But over time, the chronic cumulative effects are where we really see the most deleterious effects.
Yeah, you're just talking about sort of the hormone. Well, we're talking about cortisol and the hormone response, and this constant chronically elevated cortisol. This is where so many other problems sort of start to creep in, and again, we talk about those quite frequently. But I don't think that a lot of athletes, like competitive athletes, think like this during the day. They're not really recognizing this. Why am I feeling that brain fog? I'm just not working hard enough, or I need to suck it up, or whatever else. Or I'm getting through my day when I should be going back to the hormone balance. Like our circadian rhythms are diurnal rhythms where we have, a spike in cortisol, or should have a spike in cortisol in the morning. You'll see it kind of come up and down through the day a little bit, but it starts to level off.
Same with our melatonin.
Yeah, same with melatonin, exactly. It spikes around workout time. It's actually the hormone we're sort of chasing. That's a good thing because it helps partition, the macronutrients and nutrients to the direction, that we need them to go in order to power us through the workout at that time. And then also recovery after. And then in the evening, it should be tapering off, right? Well, if we're not getting that proper balance, or we're messed up when we're awake at 3 p.m. and feeling like we need to fall asleep, or awake at 3 a.m. and can't stay awake at 3 p.m., then some of the behaviors and some of the things athletes generally reach for are things like pre-workout, caffeine. And while we know caffeine is an awesome ergogenic aid, it also has downstream effects. If you're already in this hole, or you're off base or out of whack with your equilibrium, again, the circadian rhythm,
yeah.
you are just compounding these effects. And so to think that, just getting to bed a couple hours earlier or whatever is going to change all of that, there's more on the table to be talked about there. So again, like, what are we doing to ignore? And it's not even really shut down. I think it's to mask the signals that our body might already be sending us. We're taking products, we're putting things into
which is exactly what caffeine does. Caffeine does not provide you with energy. It just blocks your adenosine receptors, your tired receptors. So it's really, you're fooling your body into, no, I'm not tired. We're just propping up your, weekend at Bernie's limp body with caffeine, but you're not actually, you're not instilling energy into yourself. You're just compounding your energy deficit even worse.
Yeah, so I think this is the takeaway. And I think, so if you're an athlete and you're going, oh, yeah, no, I'm fine. Like, everything's fine. But you feel like if you don't have that pre-workout and you don't have the energy you need to get to or through your workout, if you're getting home at night and after your workouts and you're having this, you're up till 1 a.m. and up at 6 a.m, you've got a problem with your recovery system. I know I hear people say it all the time. Well, I can sleep 4 hours a day or 4 hours a night and be perfectly fine. Okay, maybe there are some people out there that can do that, but the majority of the studies that are being done, that so we can sort of put our finger on some of the science, that just isn't the majority of the population. So if you think you're a snowflake, maybe you are, but as we said at the top of the show, like, what we know is, in general, if you're not getting enough sleep, you're getting that much closer to the grave. So I would think deeply about this before you sort of write it off and say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'm doing just fine. Yeah. I'm getting gains. I still have a sex drive. My appetite is still good. Everything is fine. It's fine. Okay. I would just say keep checking in.
Fine compared to what?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's if you're feeling good on 4 to 5 hours of sleep, imagine if you actually got 7 to 8 hours of sleep and what you could be achieving. I think we don't, the body can adapt to some crazy things, and we can adapt to some insane circumstances that we put our body under, and we think, yeah, I'm good, I'm fine. I've been doing it this way for a long time. It works just fine for me.
Until it doesn't.
Yeah, until it doesn't. Exactly.
Which brings in the last component here that we mentioned, which was the immune system and how not getting sleep can impact that immune system. Look, if you're an athlete and you compete, you know how annoying that is. Like, then when does it show up? When does that flu show up?
Game 7.
Yeah, exactly. It shows up at the absolute worst time. It doesn't matter when it is. It's always the worst time, but it always shows up at the absolute worst time. And if you start drawing lines and connecting dots, you could probably go back a week and go, man, about a week ago I was sleeping really shitty, or I took this trip. And the excuse is, I traveled to see my family and I was exposed to all these new germs. Is it really the germs, right? Is it really the germs?
Or is it your susceptibility to the germs that are always there?
That's the exact way to look at it. It's same with the kids, when they go back to school after, having a vacation and everybody gets sick. Is it the germs? Or is it they've been running full steam ahead for a week of vacation or a 3-day weekend, where we took the trip and we were on the airplanes and we were back and forth and we disrupted the sleep rhythms and we ate poorly, and all of those things, they just stacked up to make us more susceptible to what we were already going to be exposed to.
We're just more vulnerable. The germs didn't change,
And so when we look at athletes, like they are in a sort of, I guess in general, they're a little bit more vulnerable to that stuff anyways, because we know exercise is a stress. It generally drives up cortisol response, that we have these downstream effects. And if we're not really taking care of ourselves with making sure we're getting enough calories, enough of the macronutrients we need, vitamins, minerals, hydration, sleep, and stress management, we are that much more susceptible. We're sort of putting a multiplier or an X factor on the being susceptible to getting sick or ill. So again, like I think anybody that's competed or works out hard, they know how awful that feels. And I also know what it feels like to like, I'm not that sick. I'm fine. I'll just go and I'll sweat it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Which again, maybe like depending on where you are, in your competitive preparation or where you are, maybe that is a good answer. But I mean, think about this, like rather than sweating it out, what about sleeping it out?
Hydrating it out instead of dehydrating it out.
All of those
down regulating the body, let it recover.
Instead of stimulating it. This goes right on back to the psychological impacts of, sleep and again, maybe some poor decision making and feeling stressed and anxious and all those things. So that immune system is obviously is a very important thing. We've learned a lot about it. Particularly in the last few years. We also have learned that those that get more sleep, those that exercise, those that, let's just say have a competent eating style, for lack of a better term, have a lot less risk involved for getting sick or staying sick or the impacts of getting sick. So the inevitability is you're going to get something. Right, you will get sick along the way. It's the recovery time. Like how long are you out of it?
Yeah, how quick do you fight it off?
Yeah, are you prolonging this because you're just I'm not sick. It's just fine. It's just a small fever. I'll just go to the gym and I'll sweat it out or I'll work it off. First, does it take you 3, 4, 5 days to get over there, where it may have taken you a matter of 24 hours or whatever, 1 to maybe 2 days to get over it if you had just
shut her down
her down. Reboot the system.
Yeah, I think it's, again, not to demonize cortisol, because I think cortisol gets demonized all the time. Yeah. But at the end of the day, cortisol is a fight or flight hormone. And when I always like to draw it back to the primitive nature of our biological systems, when it is saber-toothed tiger time, that's not a time where the body is going to be concerned with digestion or with fighting off illness. We're going to try to flood the body with as much adrenaline, flood the muscles and the brain with as much glucose as possible to get the fuck out of there, or try to, fight it off. But you're mimicking saber-toothed tiger time by continuing to stimulate your body when you're already sick.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so do I, man. And here's some perspective for people that are like, yeah, I've heard that before. So you're talking saber-tooth tiger time, and there's not going to be aiding in digestion. It's not going to be aiding in your immune response, and it's not fucking aiding in your gains.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally survival.
It's survival mode. Yeah.
It's toggling switches and twisting dials to manage hormones to get you through this particular time.
A threat.
Which shouldn't be very long. Right? Like if you're, a human survival, if you're chased by a saber-tooth tiger, you better get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Because they're probably going to outrun you over time. So it's a very short-lived period.
Yeah. The body's not meant to redline for that long.
But we continually push it to that red line and demand that it stays there when we could be making better choices or doing different things. So that's a really good point, a really good way of looking at it. So if this hasn't caught your attention, or if you're like, yeah, I should probably be doing a better job with my sleep, what are the things? I'm going to start with this statement. What are the things we could do? We'll talk about sleep hygiene, and let's talk about some of the things that we can do from we'll talk nutrition / supplementation perspective. I want to put this out there right now. The answer is not in a bottle. So stop that. If for those of you that are waiting for it, what's the supplement that I take to do it? Stop. That is the problem. That is a bigger problem. We need to be looking at things differently. And so some of those things are behavior changes, not pill changes, or capsule changes. So, I mean, what are your favorite things to do that you think are the most actionable by most people to maybe immediately start changing their behavior around sleep so that they can get into this deeper, more restorative sleep?
Well, we were talking yesterday about how, the good night's sleep begins the moment that you wake up in the morning, and how it is when it's, 9:00 and you need to be in bed at 10, it's too late. It's too late for you to start thinking about these things. One thing that you can do that helps really set your circadian rhythm is trying to get some sunlight as soon as you can after you wake up. I understand, here on the West Coast right now, the sun's coming up at like 7:15 a.m. So it's like I'm up for a while before the actual sun comes up. But as soon, as you can get some natural light, that will help set your circadian rhythm. So that kind of sets your day up. And as far as, getting towards bedtime, probably easiest things are the light, temperature. So we talked about that, light, temperature, even the smallest amount of, the body's sleep cycles and circadian rhythms are very directly tied to light. And that's why we try to get some light first thing in the morning in order to sort of stimulate or help push the cortisol response and the cortisol spike. And then as we get, as it starts to get dark, now melatonin should be beginning to increase. And any interruptions in that dark can, again, throw off the secretion of melatonin in favor of cortisol, because your body's like, oh, this is,
we're waking up now.
Yeah, it's daytime. The blue light from your phone, et cetera.
It doesn't understand the difference between those lights.
I've also come across some research about the sleep and daylight. And, you were talking about getting daylight as soon as you can in the morning. But then also, if you were to go outside around the time that the sun is setting, and the darkening of the sky, it doesn't have to be like at sunset, but maybe an hour or so before sunset, getting outside and getting that light, that's going to help also with the melatonin.
Yeah, it's all,
well.
The body runs
going back
on
to the
cues.
circadian rhythm.
Yeah, I know people looking at this goes back to the devices and the technology and how things are, if you're not a laborer who usually, like if you're working construction or laying bricks or working on roadways and stuff, maybe you're working an overnight shift somewhere or whatever, but generally speaking, you're out there early, it's dark, right? The sun comes up, right? When you start, you're working, when the sun comes up, you're working. And then as the day goes by at the end of the day, like you're home right before the sun goes down. This would be, like kind of like compare this to like if you're back in the good old days, whatever days those were, and you're working on a farm or you're working laborers, like as a laborer, agriculture, like you're working during the daylight hours most of the time. We're going back, let's go back 100 years, right? Let's go back even more. And so that's what you can it's very primitive to think that way. Like that's how your body operates. Like the sunrise to the sunset, it's sleepy time. Let's go to sleep. We wake up
when it's dark. We're awake when
it's light. Period. End of story. And so your body still does respond that way in a lot of ways. And so we just have to work at getting it to do that. So this is really good advice.
Yeah. There's even benefit as far as when you go outside, when you wake up, even if it's not sunny, but let's say you have overcast and clouds, there's still some benefit to the daylight.
Yeah, there's still UV light that's blue light
through.
And UV light that's coming through. And along the same lines of the body's rhythms, temperature is also a big part of that as well. Yeah. As we begin to wake up, or just prior to waking up, the body temperature begins to rise at the same time as that cortisol release is happening. And these are, this is the wake up process. And then as we get closer to bed, body temperature should be beginning to decrease in conjunction with the increase in melatonin. So that is the rhythm of the body, that as we get into our deepest sleep of the night, we'll call it 3 a.m, for most people, your body temperature should be at its lowest point, and then it begins to rise. So if we are, sleeping in an environment where you have, I was just up in the mountains and it was this heavy ass comforter that is designed for like January in Tahoe.
Yeah, but it's only October. Early September, October.
And this thing was it was too cold to not have it, but too damn hot to have it. And it definitely affected my sleep. Like, we all have experience, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're sweaty, you're uncomfortable, or it's, July and that it was just hot as hell all night. You wake up, you feel fuzzy, you don't feel rested, you don't feel like you were tossing and turning all night. Because your body doesn't want to be sleeping in that hot environment.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. We just recently moved in the place where it does not have air conditioning, and we had some hot days. It was the end of the summer, so it's not uber hot, and like this is not Arizona. We live in California, but if we get, if it gets into the 90s in the bedrooms on the upstairs of the house,
heat rises.
Yeah, heat rises. It stays up there, and so the bottom floor, like we keep closed up and turn the fans on or whatever, and it can stay relatively cool. It's actually really nice down there, but at night, I have to tell you, like it's fucked me up. Like for a couple of months, like I have had really poor sleep until very recently when the temperature started dropping fairly quickly. And even like if the temperature gets down, let's just say into the 50s, low 50s or 40s at night, it takes time for the bedroom to cool down. So like if I'm trying to go to bed around 9, 9:30, whatever it is, to be up at 6:30, whatever that is, like that bedroom is hot, and I would lay down there and I couldn't get to sleep. And so I'd wind up downstairs on the couch. I'm gonna sleep for shit down there. I go down there, it's cooler down there, like it's more comfortable. But it was, man, it really jacked me up in a lot of ways. And when that happens, we've already talked about some of those downstream effects. My drive to work out disappeared. My appetite was all over the place. I was getting very anxious, very cranky. You give me a couple of days of trying to sleep like that, and you're dealing with asshole number one. That's just how I am. And while I could probably be working on that, it's the truth, and I admit it, and everybody knows it. So they don't talk to me, and I know I'm being that way, and then that creates shit. So I'm a mess.
Yep.
But the point of that is like the temperature of your room, like a cool room, no light, like cold room. Yeah. Is there a specific like degrees that's been recommended here?
Like 60 to 68, somewhere in that range, like no more than 68.
Okay, so for me, 68 would probably feel hot.
I was gonna say.
But for Cece, like at 48 would probably be a little hot, right? But for Cece, 68 is like she's shivering and in sweatpants and socks and a hoodie, sleeping under the down comforter kind of thing. So again, that's relative to people, relative to who you are, maybe where you are in the continent, or the world or whatever. But the point of this is like a cool room, no light, and no sound stimulation, things that they're gonna keep you from getting into those sleep cycles. And heat or temperature is huge.
Yeah,
it's huge.
That's why you're seeing now a lot of like temperature controlled mattresses and things like that. That's coming into play with a lot of new like sleep technology.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff there from a sleep sanctuary or sleep hygiene type of thing. You were mentioning you mentioned melatonin, and you mentioned the sun setting, and we were talking about the circadian rhythms. Let's maybe move into some of the supplementation, because people have heard of melatonin. Most people have probably tried it at some point. I'd say a large majority of people have probably tried it at some point. I use it on a regular basis. I have, a routine that I go through, and it's been very, very helpful for me. At the same time, like it's something that you want to be careful with. But you were mentioning the sun set thing. Like when you're going to take, the best time to take your melatonin is if you're practicing what you just mentioned at that time, right? So around that sunset time where you're exposing yourself to the sun going down and the going from light to dark, that's when your body starts to do that, or to have that reaction, that hormonal reaction. And so it takes some time for you to get there. You're not just like, okay, sun's down, go to sleep. It takes a while. So you're sort of setting yourself up for success. But let's talk about the supplements and some of the things you can do, because it's not just melatonin. There's a lot of things you can do, maybe nutritionally or through supplementation to aid or help you with this recovery process.
Yeah. I mean, melatonin is obviously the one that comes up the most often. And what I have seen the most in the past is like the runaway melatonin train, where individuals become dependent on it, and then they dose it higher and they dose it higher and they dose it higher and higher and higher.
So, I heard this interesting statistic the other day, and there's this guy who is really big into sleep studies, and he's out of the UK, and he was talking about melatonin and how there could be a discrepancy from as much as like 15% to 400% on how much melatonin is
like
actually,
the dosage.
Yeah, which is actually in the dosage that you think you're consuming, because there is no regulation around it. So let's say you have this is really high, but a 50 milligrams of melatonin. I mean, it could be as low as 15%, or it could be as much as 400%
of whatever
that bottle says.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So there's, I mean, I've usually rule of thumb with melatonin is no more than 3 milligrams is usually where I have recommended in the past. Unless you have a situation where you are maybe like traveling international time zones and you need to just like
a little boost,
dead stop, reset your circadian rhythm, then you might go, 5, 8, 10 milligrams, but
temporarily.
Only
and
when
goes back to sourcing too.
Only when needed. And in terms of how much you can trust what's actually in your product, that, there is going to be variance brand to brand. But aside from melatonin, which again, like you said, melatonin can be helpful, but where I've seen people go awry is just taking too much to the point that it actually begins to have an opposite effect for them, where they now develop like full on insomnia and they don't know, up from down because they're like, well, to take more melatonin now. Now I don't sleep at all.
I was gonna say, can there be a down-regulating effect too if you get in the habit of taking melatonin?
Theoretically, because it is a hormone, and we're giving ourselves an exogenous hormone. Again, efficacy, dosage could be questionable, but regardless, yes, you could expect that your body would downregulate its own production there. So that's something.
I've heard mixed.
Exactly.
I've heard mixed thoughts on how
there's
much
theory.
it affects.
There's theory there. It's all based on individuality, I'm sure. And so to say unequivocally that, you take melatonin, you're going to shut down your own melatonin production, you can't say that.
It doesn't work quite like test.
That's not if anybody's telling you that, I'd be cautious. For context, I take a little less than 2 grams when I take it. So, it's like I learned my lesson on that a long, long time ago. Like, this is not the answer. This should be a supplement or a help, to me. And it has been. So that's so melatonin is one of those things. What else? Like because athletes are generally taking supplements anyways, this is not like a weird thing for them or a novel thing for them. Is there anything else that kind of works into there?
Yeah. I mean, I have a few that are kind of go-tos. L-theanine is one that has gained a lot of popularity. And what was it? The protocol that was going around a lot was a magnesium glycinate, L-theanine, and apigenin. Apigenin is the one that you don't quite see as often, but L-theanine can be beneficial for decreasing anxiety, so racing thoughts. So if we've felt that, tired and wired sort of feeling where you're physically tired, but you're still having racing thoughts, you have anxiety, you're just having trouble kind of shutting your mind off, L-theanine is a good option there. 100 to 200 milligrams is typically what we're looking for, L-theanine wise. A similar one, GABA, that one is one that I've taken personally that I have found to be helpful for me, which is it is a neurotransmitter, what's called an inhibitory neurotransmitter that your body produces naturally. So basically it inhibits, thoughts.
Shuts things down a little bit.
Yeah, kind of takes the edge off. It's drinking alcohol increases GABA, and that is where part of the relaxing effects of alcohol come into play, which is important to note that taking GABA on top of alcohol is not a good idea, because what ends up happening is we jam our GABA levels real high, and then the body, as it's always trying to get back to homeostasis, in the middle of the night, it will overcompensate, increasing glutamate, and glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. And if anyone has experienced the feeling of anxiety, where you wake up after you've tied one on and you have anxiety, that is because you flooded your brain with GABA, and now your brain is trying to rebalance with glutamate, and now you're hungover and you have anxiety.
It could also be because the person, you don't know the person laying next to you.
Whatever. Yeah, and then it's fueled by whatever dumb shit you did. So I would not recommend taking GABA on top of alcohol. 500 to 1,000 milligrams is what is kind of a typical range for GABA. Again, I've found that one helpful for me at like 500 milligrams. I feel like my sleep is more restful. I get into a deeper sleep. I already mentioned magnesium glycinate. Magnesium glycinate has been, I think, become quite popular. Magnesium for sleep in general. There's that product Calm that you see a lot of places, the powdered magnesium. You might see that at, whatever, Target, Walmart, those types of stores. But magnesium glycinate is magnesium bound with the amino acid glycine. And glycine is an amino acid that aids in, again, calming anxiety. So you can take the magnesium glycinate, 400 milligrams, maybe 500 milligrams. The good thing with magnesium glycinate is it does not have the same risk of laxative effects as, a magnesium oxide or a magnesium citrate, the ones that are going to give you the disaster pants. Magnesium glycinate does not do that to the same degree. You can also take glycine by itself, or collagen, for example, is a good source of glycine. Like beef protein is a good source of glycine. It's a naturally occurring animal protein, basically, or amino acid in a lot of animal protein. So glycine can be, that one you can dose higher, maybe like 3 grams. But yeah, collagen actually can be beneficial for sleep in that regard.
So I think it's important differentiation there. We were talking about melatonin, which is a hormone directly related with sleep and helping you maybe fall into a little bit deeper sleep. But the way you were addressing sort of all those last things was
facilitators.
Yeah, facilitators and more of the neurocognitive stuff specific to calming the brain down, right? And to down regulating to help you get there. And when we were talking about the athlete and the things that they go through at the end of the day, or, the human that goes through at the end of the day, in combination by maybe shutting down your phone or shutting down the screens, starting to get away from the light. We talked about getting into the light in the morning, getting and maybe checking out that sunset on occasion and see if that can help with setting that circadian rhythm. What we're talking about is calming the brain down. And again, the neurocognitive benefits that play into getting better sleep when you do this, right? And then how that downstream effect can help you be a more effective, an efficient athlete, in terms of your recovery and managing your immune system. And that's a little bit of a different approach. That's like I hadn't really thought of that. Just give me the pill. Okay, well, if you're going to take some pills, why don't you take some stuff that's going to help you through in all of these other ways as well, right? And so supplements I take several of them, right? And on a daily basis for my own reasons. I don't credit any of them with the answer. They are helping me and aiding me in doing different things. And because I've, I know you guys feel the same, because I've spent so much time doing these other things, these fundamental things, or working through my problems, my trial and error, my failures, and the successes. I kind of understand how each one impacts me in a different way. And even if some may be a bit of a placebo is a thing, right? And so it works. So again, I'm not going to sit here and say, here's what your supplement protocol should be. However, we do, if you're looking for these items, and you mentioned there, Stephen, just like some of those combinations of things, like the theanine, glycinate, those combinations. There are formulations of stuff outside of just buying magnesium, right? Or buying melatonin. And Stephen talks about these things all the time, and you'll find him talking about them on our Instagram, here on the podcast, but regularly on Instagram, because it's the easiest way to kind of immediately get out the information. And he's just really good about putting that together. And then you can also see it on the Red Dot Fitness YouTube channel. If you're looking, if you really want to party and go through 25 videos of Stephen talking about all these different things, you can. I know Stephen probably gets a little bit bored doing it sometimes, but he does a really good job delivering the information. And alongside of that, we've also made some recommendations and have some things available in these formulations, like some product recommendations for people to maybe add into their routine. Again, I was cautioning people from the beginning. It's rarely ever about the supplement, right? There's usually more behavioral stuff that goes on here and things that can be handled outside of supplements, but there is power in those things. And so if you're interested in checking those out and the ones that we recommend, you can go to rdfsupplements.com, go to the targeted formulations page. And on that page, or on that tab, and in that tab, you'll see a couple of different sleep formulas that we recommend there that include the things like GABA and the glycinate and the magnesium. And we also have melatonin products there that we like and we trust, and we feel very confident that says is in the bottle is in the bottle, because these companies have everything to lose in a lot of different ways by saying and doing different. So again, that's our plug there. The other thing is, if you heard some of those sleep hygiene things, and you felt like it sounded familiar to you, maybe you got that from our 6 Steps to Optimal Health guide, which we also have on the website. If you go to rdfguides.com, it's a free guide. It talks about sort of a framework for getting a lot of this stuff under control, whether you're an athlete or not. And there is a section in there on sleep and stress management, specifically sleep and some of these hygiene things and things that we did not mention today that you may want to try that I found valuable, and I know a lot of other people have as well. So again, rdfguides.com, it's the 6 Steps to Optimal Health, and it's free. There's some other ones there too. Download them all. I mean, there's a bunch of free
Collect
guides
them
there.
all, guys.
Some there. And alongside of that, one of those free guides is also our roadmap, our supplementation roadmap guide, which goes into a little bit deeper conversation about some of these supplements that we mentioned today. I mentioned you can hear Steven talking about. I mentioned you'll see him in the you'll read and see him in the 6 Steps to Optimal Health guide. So many resources there beyond this. So if you didn't pick it all up, you're looking for a little bit more, go there.